Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
All right. How are you?
Good.
Good. When I don't hear something, I'm always afraid that it's using the wrong audio on my
I,
computer, which happens quite frequently.
yeah, we're using terminal servers to log in at work, so the camera will pop in the office to the empty chair and
Oh, yeah.
window.
Fun. Yeah. Conference room.
Yep, exactly.
Madam Chair, good
Yes.
evening.
Hello, Kathy.
Thank you. Yep.
I'm going to give it one more minute. We do have a quorum, but I'll give one more minute. All right. While we wait for a few more of our folks to join us, I think I will get us started. Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Millis Finance Committee meeting. This is Wednesday, May 20th. I'm Jody Garson, the chair. So far, we have the members of our committee, Joyce Boyardi, Pete Berube, we have Sean Power, and Kathy McGinnis. And hopefully more will be able to join us. And hopefully I didn't miss anyone. We will be, during tonight's meeting, we'll be hearing from Town Administrator Mike Gazinski about reserve fund transfer request from the Recreation Department. We'll be reviewing the fiscal year 21 operating budget and the June 2020 warrant articles. We'll also hear from the assistant assessor about their warrant articles. And then we'll turn to our meeting minutes from our prior meeting and any other new business that may have come up. So why don't we get started talking about the reserve fund transfer request?
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Mike Kaczynski, Town Administrator. I appreciate, first of all, appreciate the chair allowing this to be added on Monday. As you know, or I believe the Finance Committee knows, the programs for which the Recreation Committee operates under the revolving fund, many of those programs had to cease operation around the middle of March because of the restrictions put forward through the COVID-19. And I know in an earlier memo sent out to the Finance Committee, it was explained a lot of the operations that are ongoing in the Recreation Department and are still going on, many of which in a virtual platform. However, unfortunately, those programs do not result in any funds coming into the revolving fund. Therefore, in order to keep that operation going through the end of the fiscal year, it's being requested that a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $12,000 be considered to cover the cost of the department head, the recreation director. It is the plan of the town to have the department assistant in that office not continue any more hours there for the rest of the year, and she'll be working primarily in the town clerk's office on town clerk issues as well as the upcoming election. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the finance committee has. And just as a brief follow-up to that, because I know that the reserve fund is getting fairly low. I will tell you that the finance director and I have spent some time working on the end of year interdepartmental transfers. And I expect that probably at your meeting on June 3rd, assuming you meet on June 3rd, we'll be presenting some transfers for the finance committee for their consideration. And as you know, we're in the month of May, and in the months of May and June, interdepartmental transfers are allowed. So in our review of the budget items that need to be adjusted, we do believe sufficient funds exist within the different departments to be able to make the necessary transfers to close out fiscal year 20. So with that, I'll stop carrying on and turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. As we all know, we treat these requests a little differently in May than we do in July or August. We're looking at, finishing out the fiscal year. And while there might not be much left in that reserve fund, we don't need to make it last that long. So any questions on this from anyone on the committee? Go ahead, Doug. You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry, waving's easier than going in and asking, raise my, anyway.
Yep.
I think I may have missed the very beginning part. As far as the rec department goes, wasn't the portion that the town is covering for the department head, wasn't that already taken care of? Well, that was already appropriated and budgeted in. Why do we need a reserve transfer for department head, for the rec department head?
Madam Chair, can I answer that?
Absolutely.
So just to follow up on that, so as the Finance Committee is aware, the funding for the Recreation Department is made up of two main sources. One is an appropriation from the town, and the remainder is proceeds from the revolving account. And that's based on anticipated receipts throughout the year. And because the fee-paying recreational programs came to a halt in the middle of March, we have not received the necessary funds to be able to close out the year with the revolving funds paying for their anticipated portion of all costs. And therefore that is—
So the revolving funds are at or below zero? So it's just a function of programs not bringing in revenue, right?
Correct.
And so the revolving fund is dry.
That is correct. As is the budget line item for that account.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
You
Brewery.
have to unmute.
I know.
Just joking. It's probably a long shot, but I thought I'd ask anyway, because a long shot I think would be better than taking funds out of the reserve fund. Is there the ability to do almost an interpersonal, or excuse me, an interdepartmental transfer from revolving fund to revolving fund for any of the others that have funds available in them?
I guess I would probably ultimately defer that to the finance director, but it's my understanding that I don't know if there are any other revolving funds that would fit the legal requirements to be able to pay this at this time.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that this is before the Finance Committee right now, as opposed to before the Select Board and the Finance Committee for interdepartmental transfers, because the Select Board aren't meeting again until June 1st. And since the funds are now have now run dry, we need to know whether or not funds will be made available in the shorter term versus the longer term. Theoretically, I mean, if there are funds available from interdepartmental transfers, that could theoretically be put back into the reserve fund. But again, I don't believe there are any other revolving funds that could be used for this purpose. So I don't know, Carol, if you have any thoughts on that.
She might not be able to unmute. I'm not sure.
All right. So I mean, that's my understanding, though, is that we could look into
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. So this revolving fund is specifically for recreation. The other revolving fund that we have is for extended day, exclusively for extended day. So there is no other revolving fund that can cover this expense. If we don't do a reserve fund transfer at this time, at the end of the year, if this fund is in deficit, it will go against your free cash in the fall. It can't stay in deficit.
Okay. Madam Chair, if I may just follow up. I understand.
Sure.
I thought there were probably 8 or 10 different revolving funds just from my experience in reading the article in past years. And I get that it's, maybe it would have to be done via, warrant article or something. If the answer is no, the answer is no. Again, I felt it important to go for the long shot versus take money out of reserve.
Right. No, I understand. This is a special fund set up just for recreation. And the others are set up specially for different types of expenses, but they can't be commingled.
Other questions?
Yeah, Madam Chairman,
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
this is, we've discussed this scenario in years past because the rec director was always asking what happens if she doesn't bring in enough to cover. It's never been an issue until now, and it's only an issue now because of situations that are far beyond her control. I think it's a fair use of reserve fund, and I think it's a fine way to use it. How much was the total amount? I having trouble
12,000.
opening.
Yeah, 12,000.
Okay. And I think at this late date in the year, we do have the ability to do the transfer, so I'm less concerned about that. And this was and I always put the litmus test up. Is it unexpected and is it unforeseen? And I think everything that's happened to the rec department is unexpected and is the definition of unexpected and unforeseen. I think they would have been fine had it not been for the COVID-19. So I firmly endorse this.
And with this transfer, we'll still have 8,000.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions before I call for a motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Not hearing any other comments, I move that we vote to approve the transfer of $12,000 from the reserve fund account to fund the recreation position shortfall.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $12,000 from the reserve fund to the recreation department head salary line item. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please
I think
say
you have to do a
aye.
roll call.
Yeah, I think I will have to do a roll call on this one. So if everyone who is a member can unmute themselves, we'll go one by one. I vote aye. Joyce Boyardi,
I vote aye.
Pete Berube,
Aye.
Craig Schultz,
Aye.
Doug Riley,
I
Katie Tu,
Aye.
Sean Power,
Aye.
Kathy McGinnis,
Aye.
and I think that's it. Did I miss anyone? If so, say aye. All right. Thank you very much. The motion passes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next up, I believe is, I have to get back to the right page. The review of the fiscal year 21 operating budget. Mr. Gazinski, you want to highlight a few things for us?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize to those that were on the Zoom call with the select board on Monday, because it'll be a lot of repetition with just a few tweaks, but I will go through that. I'm assuming everyone did receive a copy of the packet. It was basically the same packet that was sent out to the select board for their meeting on Monday, with just a few items updated. And again, just to bring everyone up to speed on where we have been with the budget process, after the select board deliberated on available revenues for next year, they settled on a revenue estimate that is based upon a 5% reduction in estimated revenues from local aid and local receipts. And there are a number of things that, at least on the municipal side, that would be taking place in order to meet that reduction, beginning with a 10% reduction in salaries and wages for all departments in the Veterans Memorial Building, with the exception of the Board of Health and DPW. This being accomplished with the elimination of Friday hours at the Veterans Memorial Building. As part of this, the Council on Aging is proposing the elimination of the position of Department Assistant and a redistribution of the department's workload. That's represented in the COA budget. And this arrangement would still allow the Council on Aging to be open 8 hours per day, Monday through Thursday. So we're trying to maximize the services to the public, even with these adjustments. In the packet you received, there are some memos from some of the department heads, the treasurer collector and the assessor, just discussing some of the impacts of the reduction in staff hours. I believe in a packet from a prior meeting, you received some other comments and observations from some other departments as well. Also in your packet is in the packet that you received is a proposed personnel plan for next year. The personnel plan just has a couple of adjustments. The first is an increase in the wages of the full-time staff by a 2.5% amount. This basically affects 3 full-time employees and mirrors the increases in the union contracts. So the total cost of that will be less than $4,000 to the general fund, and it's already included in the proposed budget that you have. And certainly, I strongly recommend that this budget, these adjustments go forward so as not to penalize a few town employees who are not in a union, who are not contracted. As part of the updated personnel plan, the building commissioner has recommended a reduction in the yearly stipends of a few of the inspectors in the department, based on some continued reorganization and improvements to the department that he is working on. The capital planning committee's recommendation is unchanged since the finance committee's meeting. I will say that, and I apologize, I think I'll jump ahead to the annual town meeting warrant for a second. I think a page was missing in the original packet that went out, and I think a supplement was put out later this afternoon. The page that contained, I think, Articles 11, 12, and 13. Based upon the select board's discussion this past Monday, there were a few adjustments to how the capital projects have been presented. We did split out the computer leases for the school so that the prior approved leases are now within Article 11, and the amount for the new computer lease is one remaining in Article 12. So just for clarity for the public looking at the articles, so they understand the old versus the new computer lease amounts. Let's see. So I don't know if there's any other questions on the, and as well, the library adjustment of 5%, which the library director has been coordinating with the trustees on the best way forward with that. I believe there was also a document in the packet that went out outlining those adjustments within the library budget, as well as the new hours of the library based on those budget numbers. So I guess I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and see if there are any questions on the budget as presented. Just to be aware as well that there is 40,000 in municipal operational funds that are being applied to the crosswalk signals and lights. And I believe that leaves a residual in the overall budget of around $10,000. Is that correct, Carol?
Yes.
So Carol and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and in the budget. Do want to mention, and we have had discussions with the school administration. That 5% reduction would result in a reduction of the school budget of about $296,000
Madam Chair.
from the original proposed.
Yes, Mr. Berube.
I've got a couple of questions, and I would ask that Mike would, if now is not the right time to ask them based on the first one, please just defer, at your discretion. There was discussion on Monday night regarding some reallocation, that may not be the right word, of funds from some previously unexpended funds on some water projects, I believe, or some DPW projects nonetheless, where the funds were going to be proposed to be basically reallocated to the current DPW work. Was that a budget discussion or an article discussion?
That is actually an article discussion.
Okay, so we can defer on that
when we get to the
Yep.
that.
And then my other comment really gets to the school budget, the school's part of this 5% reduction. When the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board meeting the other night went into quite a bit of scrutiny over the town side, their cuts, line item by line item. Not exhaustive, but certainly not cursory by any means. And I'm curious as to when will be the appropriate time. When will that occur? When will you or when will we hear from the school on how are they going to meet their $296,000, their plan to cut those funds?
Mike, can I jump in?
Oh, absolutely.
The school committee is going to be presented with a series of cuts tonight. So I would say at some meeting after tonight, because I assume that they will, advise the administration and actually approve a list tonight and approve a new budget tonight, that we would be able to come back to the finance committee and show you what those cuts would be.
Thanks, Terry.
And Madam Chair, I will mention, I forgot to mention, there was one change that was made to the budget by the Select Board on Monday night, and that was a reduction in the town council request by $9,000 and an increase in the library budget by $9,000. That was the only change made to the budget at the meeting.
Other questions?
I've got one.
Madam Chair?
Jody. Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just, it may have been because I left, if you can call it early, after an hour and a half. But there was discussion around the DPW summer positions. Was that agreed to leave in at one position, or was that reduced? I didn't know how that was resolved.
There was a discussion there. There was no, that was going to be looked at again, but it hasn't been formally changed as of this
Okay.
time. So, as of right now, it is in there at the 15,000 for the summer help in the DPW.
Thank you. I tried to duck out as soon as it sounded like it was a done deal, and I just wasn't sure what was the final situation there.
Kathy, you had a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. To the town administrator, you mentioned way back that several meetings ago that it appeared that a $1,000 consultant fee would be retained for the services of Miss Hannah. Could you let me know if those are still in there?
Yeah, the $1,000 isn't for Hannah York or for CLT. It was held in case an unknown need came up for consulting services during the year. So it has not been specified as a particular project to a particular consultant. Sometimes we need something as simple as, you know, a simple appraisal or some item that we need consulting fees for, and understandably $1,000 will not cover very much, but we wanted to keep the line item there.
Thank you. I thought you had specifically mentioned her name, and I only say that because the town employees are taking what I see as a massive cut in salary, and you know, with the large, you know, the finance department is well-staffed, as is your department, Mr. Kaczynski, that to throw another $1,000 into the accounting mix, I don't think, it just doesn't appear to bode well to the staff at the town hall that's working around this reduction. Thank you.
And I appreciate the question. I would say that just to clarity, Hannah York from CLT, who has done an outstanding job for us during the transition, had her only services through the town over the past probably almost a year have been through the Munis grant that we received from the state to set up the chart of accounts for Munis. So that's really a non-issue, but yeah, we've pretty much cut all of those line items to the bone. And I appreciate your comments. I would say there are days that my office and the finance office are stretched pretty thin though. So, but I appreciate the fact that a lot of us here will be dealing with, you know, trying to get work done on reduced hours, and it'll be a difficult time, but we have a great staff here and we will work through it.
Thank you. And also, again, Madam Chair, if I might, Mike, could you, you mentioned the Veterans Memorial Building with the 10% salary cut. Did the library all the staff there take a salary cut?
No, at the library, it was a 5% across the board. So their entire budget was cut by 5%. And the library director and the trustees went through and came up with an amount or with a reduction to try to minimize any damage to the services to the public. But it was there was really two different scenarios, because at the VMB we are extremely tight on expenses, so there really is nowhere to go there for that level of cut. The only place to go here was through salaries and wages. But over at the library, it was a 5% across the board.
And the selectmen did increase the library. What was increased there? The hours of whom, Mr. Kaczynski?
It was to move $9,000 over to the salary line of the library, but I believe that only happened less than 48 hours ago. So I think they're still looking at how they would incorporate that into their operational plan, those funds. So I don't have an answer for that this evening.
I just find it, you know, unfair somehow that to the Veterans Memorial Building staff that they're taking a cut in pay And the library has such an expense account that it can absorb a 5% cut in pay without cutting any of the salaries of their staff. So I just like that noted, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Joyce, you had a question?
Yeah, I understand the $12,000 being transferred to the Recreation Department's salary. I kind of missed something. I don't know, maybe I wandered. But the assistant, her hours are going to be solely at the town clerk's office. Is she getting additional hours, or are her hours being cut, or is she being spread out to other departments?
Certainly over the next month, we see a lot greater demand for staff time in the town clerk's office than in the recreation department. And in reviewing this issue with both the finance director and the town clerk, there are sufficient funds in the election department to cover additional hours that would basically allow the department assistant for the recreation to carry up to 30 hours. It'd be up to the town clerk as to what the relative need for the hours would be. But there are sufficient funds to cover that, and we do anticipate this being an unusual election year, and it has been to date, so there'll be a lot of extra work there to try to prepare for this unique election season we're going through, as well as the different aspects of the town meeting that will be unique as well. So we believe that the
No, go
service
ahead.
in the town clerk's office will be higher. So we basically transferred her hours away from recreation to the town clerk and elections departments, because she does work in both departments, for the remainder of this fiscal year.
That was my question for her. What was the duration?
Yes, through June 30th at this point.
And then what happens after that?
We're going to reevaluate as we go later into June to determine, where we are, what the needs are for the departments, and whether or not, the different levels of need in those departments will really guide us in determining how the staffing will be done moving forward. There's still, as you know, a lot of unknowns as to what types of activities will be allowed when. So that'll have a lot of bearing on how we move forward into next fiscal year.
Thank you. Pete?
Thanks. You may be surprised to hear me ask this question, but Mike, in the event that the federal government comes through with relief to the states, how are these cuts undone?
Well, really, the earliest they could be undone, would be the earliest we could have a town meeting. So if we did receive a large influx of funds from the federal government that would allow us to reinstate the hours and reopen Friday, we would have to have a town meeting, whether that be a special meeting or the meeting in November, and then determine, the date at which we could go back. I think it may take some time to get any clarity from the federal and state government, although I do believe there will be additional funds coming. I just don't know how much and don't know when. So we're going to be waiting and watching on that, and I'll be discussing this with the select board as information comes in from the federal and state governments as to what we may do later in the summer for planning based on any possible grants that come down the line. And certainly we'll talk a little bit later about the CARES Act and the funds that the town is currently eligible for, which are more limited in scope, but also significant to our costs, both for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. So I will get to the grant end a little later, but we could make a change back mid-year should the funds become available.
So if, Madam Chair, if you'd humor me just a little bit longer on this. So if cuts are made to hours and salaries in town hall, I assume that those funds are never, if the funding comes in from the federal government later in the year, that those funds are never made up to those employees that take the cuts under the scenario that we're discussing right now. And I've somewhat been at odds with it, you know that. And one of the things that I've been, I guess, a proponent for, at least investigating, would be to defer, all pay raises and things like that, which I understand can be deferred and can be paid back in the event that funds are realized later in the year. Wouldn't that be more beneficial than cutting people's pay now to put forth a 5% reduction when we could adopt the 20 budget for, whatever period is prudent, and then if the federal funding comes through, pay those people back for the deferment of their raises potentially?
That theoretically could be done. It would require, and I had some discussions with several of the unions that are impacted. That sort of approach would require their formal sign off on an agreement. I've had some discussions. Those discussions will continue, but if they were to go forward, would still take some time. So based upon that, I feel I'm forced to move ahead at this time based on the plan that you see and the budgets you see, but I don't discount the idea and the approach for discussion, and I can assure you we've had some of those discussions and those will continue. But before you is a budget that the town can legally execute, and without having to wait for formal sign-offs. We do have impact bargaining with the unions that are impacted by this ongoing. And as part of that, we're having some of those discussions that you just mentioned. So the result of that will determine whether or not we can take that path or not.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, just one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Joyce.
Mike, you mentioned about a special meeting, a possible special town meeting that would have to incur in order to be able to, if those funds came in. Couldn't we, at this town meeting, the current town meeting coming up, put something into place so that if those funds do come in, we don't have to have a special town meeting to put them back where they belong?
The short answer is no. The town meeting cannot appropriate funds it does not have. So it could not happen until we had some formal letter from the grant provider, whether that be the state or federal government granting us those funds. We simply could not authorize the spending of funds that we do not yet have legal possession of.
No, I don't mean that, but rather than having a special town meeting to appropriate those funds, isn't there some way of saying in our next town meeting, when and if those funds come into play, then they can be implemented? We won't have to have a special town meeting. We can, no?
Short answer is I
Yes,
do
no.
not believe so. I can certainly pose that question to town council to confirm that, but I do not believe that would be allowed. I mean, even in cases where we expect, say, a federal grant or a state grant, until we have written proof of its receipt, we can't move forward with it. And the same as here, is the town meeting can't authorize funds that it is not in formal possession of. But
Okay.
I will check on, make sure that there's no avenue here to do that.
Well, I'm just thinking of the added cost to a special town meeting.
Right. And again, I mean, we do have a fall annual town meeting in November. And depending on timing, that could be an avenue as well, should sufficient funds to come in to make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Madam Chairman.
Mr. Riley, sorry, Doug had asked, he had a question.
Sorry, I'm still learning how to Zoom. I saw you smile though when I sent you that. So I just had a question, not to beat this horse because we seem like we're still on this area, but regarding the summer help for the DPW, is there something specific or special about what's planned for the summer? Because it seems to me that it's not really the greatest look if the DPW salaries are not being cut and we have cuts elsewhere if we're paying summer help under the circumstances. I see Mr. McKay is on here.
Oh, I appreciate the concern, and I certainly let Mr. McKay discuss it if he'd like, but I would say that, you know, with the summer help, they provide a lot of grass cutting and management of the properties in the summer to allow the full-time staff to carry on other important duties. If there was a conscious decision made to just let the memorials and the different grounds of the town buildings kind of go over the summer, you know, or just have minimum cuttings, that's something that is it's a policy decision that could be discussed. It was discussed by the select board at some length on Monday evening. And I just also note to the finance committee that with the DPW project still ongoing in its planning phases, parts of that project would require DPW staff to do a lot of groundwork for the project in preparation. So that will take a lot of their time as well. So it ultimately comes down to a decision on how acceptable it is to the different boards and the public as far as the maintenance of the different areas over the summer. But I certainly appreciate the point and the argument. It's a legitimate policy discussion to have.
Mr. McKay, would you like to weigh in?
Yes, just briefly, I've submitted a list of what the summer help do every year to the town administrator and to the Board of Selectmen. He has the list, and when he wants to share the list.
Actually, it was shared with the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee had.
Did they get the mowing list?
Oh, the mowing list.
Yeah. So that list, and whatever perception of what people see, I can tell you right now that the ball fields won't be cut on the list. The ball fields, the library, police station, the fire station, they take care of all their own property. The police station will not be done, the library, town hall. So the only ones that will be done will be the monuments and the Clyde Brown Field in the upper field. That's what summer help does. Oak Grove will not be cut because the staff is just not there to do it. Never mind, we can leave out the DPW building process. There, if that comes to fruition, we'll hire the people, you know, when time is needed. So that's what happens. I mean, if it's cut, it's cut. I can't do anything about it. He has the list, and like shutting the lights off on Route 109 starting July 1st, that will just add that to the public that, you know, as long as they know what's going to happen, you vote with the selectmen any way you'd like.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Kaczynski.
Yeah, I did receive that list from the director the other day, and I'd be more than happy to forward it to the Finance Committee just for your review prior to any deliberations you have on your recommendations. So I will forward that to the committee within the next day or two, so you'll have it for your next meeting. But yeah, it would have impacts certainly to the maintenance of a lot of different town parcels. And I think it would be noticed by the public. So again, it's a policy decision that that both the select board and obviously the Finance Committee would need to have. So I will forward that information to you.
Okay, thank you. That would be helpful to have. Mr. Schultz, you have.
I'd like to agree with Doug. The optics aren't great. Putting staff on while cutting hours to other staff, but beyond that, I'd like to see the list. The other piece, though, is the adding back the salaries or the cuts that are going to occur, the 10% cuts to town hall if money should become available. That's why I, for one, was, I was fairly confident there'd be some type of federal money coming in or state money. And I've always believed I've always known you can't give back that 10% until November at the latest. Hopefully you can do a meeting in September if we get the money, get a quorum together and have that meeting. But that was one of the points why I was advocating for not implementing the 5% cut, but the select board has chosen to recommend 5% cuts. If the money comes in before June 30th, great, we can revote the budget immediately and not make those cuts. But otherwise it'll require a September. I would move for a meeting as soon as we get the money, you know, if that is September. And then the town hall staff is only without that 10%, only has that 10% cut for a few months, not until November. But that was my fear, that there would be money coming in from the feds of the state and that we would implement cuts that directly impacted our employees with no way to really make them whole again until a later date, November at the latest, but hopefully sooner. So that's just my thought on it. And I'm not saying to change the 5%. The select board has voted on that. That's what we'll be looking at doing. But this is the ramification of making these decisions early when there's a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
definitely tricky in terms of timing.
Yeah.
Kathy, did you have?
Yes, I did, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'd just like to go back to the 2 employees for summer help. People forget that the 9 or 10 employees at the DPW, they take summer vacation. So everybody taking a week or 2 leaves a lot of holes to fill. And that was a great reason for having the summer help. So to say that they're not getting a salary cut, the DPW, well, then you don't need that help. Well, they're not going to be around. They're going to be away on vacation. So I'd just like everyone to remember that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kathy. Other questions? All right. Mr. Kaczynski, then I think we'll move on to the warrant articles and any points that we need to review on those.
Certainly. Again, I just want to make sure everyone received. I think there was one missing page. Hopefully everyone received that in the second email today. Sometimes the scanner eats a page, so hopefully everyone's gotten that. So this is the updated draft that you have of the annual town meeting warrant. The board did discuss this, the select board discussed this at length on Monday. And there are just some notes I'd like to make in regards to it. Hold on one second. I don't know, Madam Chair, if you want me to go through every article or just touch upon the items of particular interest.
Yeah, I don't think we need to go through every one. Why don't we just touch on those that are that we need to focus on?
So with that, Madam Chair, I'd probably start with Article 11, the page that you were originally missing. That has been changed slightly from the original draft sent out. This includes the committed computer leases at $46,600. And so it adjusts the total amount for all those items to $448,433. I didn't know if there were any questions on Article 11. With Article 12 is really the second piece of that, and that is the new computer lease, and that is for $23,300. We've been advised by town council for new leases to have a separate article for them so that they require a 2/3 vote. They're considered a borrowing. So I don't know if there are any questions on Articles 11 and 12. And the items, I mean, if you look in your packet, there was also information from the Capital Committee. You'll see there were a few other items from the Capital Committee that did reach the priority to being funded. However, there simply wasn't funding for a few of the items that were listed as the highest priorities, namely the self-contained breathing apparatus and the we would look to have those items funded at the fall town meeting, assuming there'll be free cash available for that. And I know there's, the board may have some follow-up discussions, select board may have some follow-up discussions about the two-way radios next week. That's for the DPW, and that's a somewhat interesting item because it does involve not just the general fund, but the other funds, the water and sewer funds and that item, I believe the board is going to discuss further. But right now, this is the article as forwarded to the Finance Committee for your consideration.
Okay, did we have any questions on that? Joyce?
Question, just a comment. The new computers lease was because it's a computer lease that's up for renewal. It's not a new lease, correct? It's not for new computers. It's for a lease that's coming out of, that's no longer an existing, what's it, expiring?
He would know more about the specifics of the lease than I do.
You've been doing this for years. It's just all been combined together. And now at the advice of council, we've separated out the first year portion or the new portion so that can get the 2/3 vote versus the year 2 and year 3 that's being renewed. This particular year, the primary part of that new portion or that first year portion is going to be to replace the lab at the middle high school, which is, I think those computers are 6 years old going on their 7th year.
So as I see it, there's two leases here. There's the existing one for the 46.6, and does that cover just 1 year of the lease or 2 fiscal years?
You actually have 3 years.
Okay.
In other words, you have a lease that's in year 3 of 3.
Okay.
You have a lease that's in year 2 of 3. And those two are one warrant article, as I understand it, Mike. Am I correct?
On the capital.
On the capital?
The committed leases are all combined on Article 11 with the other capital.
Right. So
Okay.
those two are part of Article 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we call the first year, okay, of a
Right.
new lease is that piece that I think is Article 12.
Yes.
My question is, that new lease, though, is for an expiring lease. It's not a whole new lease all over again for new computers or anything.
No, it's a new lease for new computers.
Oh, all right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Craig.
we've consistently had a 3-year cycle on all these, Joyce.
Right.
So the first year you have to vote a 2/3 majority to approve it, and each year has been about $23,000. That's how you get to the 46.6. There's been a constant amount turning over.
Right.
So the first year gives you a new place, and that needs a 2/3 majority. That's why it has to be split out. The next 2 years are just paying really the next 2 installments on the second and third year of the other leases. So if we didn't fund Article 12, we would not replace the computers that are in cycle to be replaced this year. So it's a progression each year how it goes through. And so next year, that 23.3 we vote now will be in the standard, pay the lease amount, and year 3 piece will fall off of that. So it'll always cycle through. It's just fairly consistent. But the lawyer, and I think he suggested this for years, is that we break them into 2 categories, because one needs a 2/3 majority, and the other just needs a simple majority.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions on Article 11 or 12?
One question on Article 11. I think I know the answer. Just want to confirm it. The last two, the drinking water, those are paid out of water surplus or water fees, not out of.
Yeah, earnings.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next article, Madam Chair, Article 13, which was put forward by the treasurer, would seek to appropriate unexpended funds originally appropriated under 3 prior projects, all related to DPW projects, to pay a portion of the cost of the DPW facility construction, renovation, and remodeling project approved under Article 13 of the warrant of May 13th, 2019. So I know that article, as written, would help defray some of those costs. I know that's another item that I think the select board may discuss again at their meeting on June 1st, and also part of the discussions with the PBC and their work on the project, which the current DPW project is ongoing with the architects and the designers. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on that one. These are residual funds from prior projects.
Yeah. Mr. Ruby?
Thank you. This is the article I was asking about earlier, Mike. So I'm looking for you to confirm that the funds coming off of those other projects are being used to defray the lending costs, and not there's no associated increase in scope in the Article 13 approved in the 2019 Article 13.
As presented, that's the case, yes.
That's correct. And the total amount is $136,000.
And is this consistent with, I think we discussed this before, maybe last year when we were looking at the DPW project. Is my memory correct on that?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, we always like to find money that we haven't spent.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, this relates directly to that building. It was previous years to try to patch it up, and we just never spent it to patch it. So I think it makes sense to put it into the replacement. It's the same intent by the voters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Madam Chair, on Article 14, this kind of dovetails in with the back to Article 11, the $199,921 would be the first year cost, estimated cost of the of a maintenance agreement for the water tanks on Farm Street and Walnut Street. The Capital Planning Committee discussed this item at great length during its process. And I think there was a strong feeling of the majority of the committee that that it is the right time to move forward with this agreement. This particular article would authorize the select board to sign a contract of up to 20 years. I believe at this time they're looking at a 15-year contract, but any contract in excess of 3 years does require the authorization of town meeting. And if this were not to go through, there would need to be a major capital expenditure or article put forward to do the major repairs. This essentially allows a professional company that this is what they do, is they come in and maintain tanks in the most cost efficient and effective manner. And then the town is assessed a fee per year for that service. And it's used in many communities in the Commonwealth. And it's also a great way to manage the funding of this maintenance. And this is funded through the Water Enterprise Fund.
Okay. I think in our package, there was information from Mr. McKay about, I think it was from the consultant or the company that would hold this contract that kind of told us what they were anticipating and the value of using this approach. Are there any questions on that? All right.
I guess, Madam Chair, unless there's questions on the next several articles, I would like to move to Articles 19, 20, and 21. And I know that I believe the Assistant Assessor, as we know, the Finance Director is on the line. And I didn't know if there were, if you wanted just a brief overview of these three articles.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
What the effect of them would be, both to the taxpayers that would qualify, as well as, you know, any impact or cost, and how that would be handled. So,
Yes.
Carrie and Terry, if you want to talk about this a little bit.
Terry, are you all set to talk about this? Oh, she may not be
Maybe.
able to.
Maybe. I just need to pull it up.
Nope, the other Terry.
No, Terry, it's, sorry.
I was
Terry
going to say,
Gonzalez.
this warrant article didn't sound familiar to me.
Looks like
I have confidence you could have said something.
I appreciate your willingness to jump into the breach, though.
Seems to be having trouble connecting to the audio.
Right. Well, I'll start, and if Terry Gonzalez is able to jump in, I'll let her jump in. On Article 19, this article is to vote, to see if the town will vote to decrease the age requirement from the age of 70 as of July 1st for the applicable fiscal year to age 65 as of July 1st for the applicable fiscal year for the eligibility of the senior tax exemption clause 41C under Chapter 184, subsection 51 of the Acts of 2002. This would allow more seniors to take advantage, well, to maybe qualify for the exemption that we have available to them. Right now, there are 6 seniors who qualify for this program, and maybe it would allow others to be able to qualify as well. On that, the current exemption amount is $1,000 per year if they qualify. Article 20, it's to see if the town of Millis will vote to increase the gross receipts that seniors may have in the prior calendar year to be eligible to defer property taxes under Mass General Law, Chapter 59, subsection 5, Clause 41A, Acts of 2005, from $20,000 to $40,000, which such increase to be effective for tax deferrals granted for any fiscal year beginning on or after July 1st, 2020. We currently do not have any residents that have taken a deferral exemption, but this may allow some people to be in a category where they'd be able to apply for that. Article 21 is to see if the town of Millis will vote to increase the value of the whole estate, including value of the domicile available to surviving spouse, minor child, elderly person owning real property pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 59, subsection 5, Clause 17D, by approving to increase whole estate value for consumer price index with the Department of Revenue to inform the town annually with the amount of this increase beginning with fiscal year 2021. We currently have 3 individuals who qualify for the 17D exemption in town. Are there yes?
Carol, I'm sorry, I don't understand Article 21. I mean, you read it beautifully, but I don't quite understand what it is, what it's doing.
Okay, so Article 21 is for a surviving spouse or a minor child or an elderly person owning real estate. Right now, what the value of the whole estate gets taken into consideration, but it has never increased with the consumer price index. So each year you can increase, the law allows it if you vote for it, for us to be able to allow the increase to the whole estate that the person owns. So if this year it was, say the equivalent was $20,000, if the consumer price index goes up 2%, then next year you'd be able to get $24,000 as part of the basis for this exemption.
So if I understand correctly, this exemption looks at the value of your whole estate to determine whether you qualify for a real estate tax abatement or exemption. Is that correct?
An exemption for the widow, you're right, in the widow, just this one category.
Right. So there's several categories under which people may qualify, and this is the one which has not been indexed to increase. So if it was 20,000 in 1970, it might still be 20,000 today. And as we know, inflation tends to impact those values. So this would just allow it to rise according to the CPI, but it would be up to the Department of Revenue to inform the town of what the new number would be.
Of what the new CPI is.
Oh,
What
okay.
the consumer. So we would just go off of what they tell us, and then we would increase whatever we currently have for a value for that by 1% or 2%, whatever it happens to be.
But do we know what the whole estate value that is the threshold on this article or on this bylaw?
I don't have that in front of me. Terry would know that.
Terry,
Right now,
Terry, I'm sorry, Terry's on the line, but she for some reason we can't hear her. But
Right.
she can see and hear us. Unfortunately, she can't seem to.
right, she'd have to dial. Yeah. So we currently only have 3 residents in town that are eligible or taking this exemption. It's the rate we have right now is $175 per year.
The amount that can be
The
abated?
amount of the exemption, right.
Okay. All right. So at some point, you know, whoever has this article is going to need to know what that threshold
Yes.
value is.
Right. We'll get to that detail.
Pete, you had a question?
Yes, please. Thank you. Carol, on Article 19, can you tell us a little bit more about the origin of the article? What is the rationale behind reducing the age when the working age of Americans is going up, the lifespan of Americans is going up, and the town is in a position of needing additional revenue, not less revenue? Who drafted this article?
So this article is coming from the Board of Assessors at the request of the Select Board that we find ways to help the seniors in town possibly have some reduction in their or their ability to pay their real estate taxes. Was it Doug? He's waving.
Yeah, Doug, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, what is the estimated cost to the town in terms of, you know, lost revenue of the changes in these 3 articles?
There's really no way for us to have an actual number for you because it's based on people's ability to qualify for the exemption. We don't have residents' personal financial information available to us. That's something that would only be available once they fill out the application and present it to the Board of Assessors. That information stays 100% confidential with the Board of Assessors, so it would be whether or not they qualify for this exemption. These are all exemptions under the state law that people are allowed to have if it's passed by the town. Right now, as I said, we have under the section 41, which is for the senior 41C, we have 6 individuals and it's $1,000 apiece. So that's $6,000 for that one. I don't know if you'd have an abundance of people applying because they have to, there's a certain criteria threshold, and the majority of people more than likely would not qualify. It's just for the people that are in that category that could apply earlier.
But we do probably know how many people are between 65 and 70, or roughly, so.
Right, but of that number, for them to be able to qualify for this $1,000 exemption, I'm not sure you have a very large population. I think it's out there will be a good resource for some individuals who really need it.
Carol, Madam Chair. Carol, what is the threshold? Maybe by letting us know what the threshold is, we'll have a better understanding of why
Right.
this from 70.
Right. We'll have all this information available for you next week. Actually, Terry, I'm sure can email it out to you, Terry Gonzalez, so the Board of Assessor, so the assessor, so we can get that information to you.
Have you seen an increase from the ages between 65 and 70 coming in looking for an exemption?
No, we were asked by the Board of Selectmen to see what we could do to help the senior population in town. Give them, any relief we could give them toward their real estate taxes, and these are the items that we were able to come up with that the town could vote on.
Yeah, but there are several programs that a resident may qualify under, but many of the thresholds are so low that there are very few people in town who actually qualify.
Right, right.
Exactly.
I'm not questioning the point here. I'm totally fine with doing things in like this. My question simply was, do we have a reasonable estimate of what those changes would cost? You're doubling the amount under 59, section 5. So presumably that's going to cost, that's going to have a cost. And I guess if you doubled the number, if there's 6 more people under Article 19 that would qualify, then you're adding $6,000. So I was just curious about trying to put some ballpark estimate on what the cost of the town is. Is it $10,000? Is it
Right.
$30,000?
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
No. Yes, Mr. Pizzuti.
Thank you. I did get an email from the assessor, and she has indicated that there are 950 homeowners in Millis over the age of 65. We don't know the economic condition of those homeowners in such detail to know what percentage would qualify for these reductions or exemptions.
Right, clearly. So do we actually know how many are 70 or over?
That's a good question. I'm sure if she knows, she will email me in a minute.
Because like you could get to C by taking A minus B and then.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well.
How many additional people would qualify? Yeah. Okay.
So if there's 6 over, yeah, it's a math formula. Yeah.
Right.
Well, this is a FinCom meeting, so.
No, I'm writing it down. I'm writing the formula now. Putting in X's, putting in a few other things, waiting for some numbers.
Carry the 3.
Yeah, I think we want to support those changes that will have the biggest bang for the buck for seniors that are particularly struggling. And where those
Right.
thresholds have been too low that no one qualifies, then they're not helpful to folks who are struggling. But if
Totally
we
agree.
change every metric, some who may not actually be as needy as others may qualify. So, there's a balance there, trying to do what makes sense to help out residents who really need it, but not go too far and hamper our ability to pay what we need to pay for the town. All right, so yeah, we'll be looking for more information on each of these articles. What are the specific thresholds? What are the numbers of households that would newly qualify if we have that information? If we were to change these bylaws, I guess these are bylaw changes. Is that correct?
It would be exemption changes, right?
Okay. All right. Any other questions on these articles? All right. Well, then let's go on. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate it. Let's go on to Article 22.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last 2 articles I'd really want to touch upon of any note are Articles 22 and 23. Article 22 would amend Article 1, Section 1 of the town's general bylaws by deleting the first sentence and replacing it with the following. The annual town meeting for the transaction of business will be held on the first Monday of May, and the annual town meeting for the election of officers and such other matters as may be voted on the official ballot will be held on the second Monday in May. So the select board have had some discussion in regards to this, with the feeling being, and of which many agree, as do I, that it would seem to make more sense to have the annual town meeting where we are wrapping up the town business and preparing for the next year, finalized before the new officers, elected officers of the town come in for continuity, and that the folks that have been part of that process the whole time are there for the town meeting. And then the election is held shortly thereafter. So that certainly seems to be the trend. For the most part, that is happening across Massachusetts for towns, and seems to make the most sense. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have in regards to that proposed change.
I'm assuming that this would necessitate special town meetings for those meetings that authorize a large project like a new school, because you have to have it pass at town meeting and at the ballot, on a ballot. Is that correct?
It doesn't matter. The order generally doesn't matter. So you could certainly have the town meeting approve it, and then a week later the ballot question could be before the voters. So
Okay.
there's no restriction on whether one occurs before the other. There are certain circumstances where they have to occur within a certain period of time of each other, but I'm not aware of really any instances where one has to occur before the other.
Okay, thanks. Other questions?
And Madam Chair, Article 23, really the last major article I wanted to discuss is a sewer connection bylaw. As I'm sure most of the Finance Committee is aware, there have been some concerns in regards to the available sewer capacity of the town as it relates to the Charles River Water Protection District, and the amount of gallons per day that were authorized to send to the plant. And part of the concern is that we do have a fairly large amount of properties that we have had to set aside as our capacity for, that have had the opportunity for many years in order to hook up their sewer to the system, but for a number of reasons have chosen not to do that. This would contemplate a requirement that those individuals in that situation hook up to the town sewer system within a period of time, and that failure to do so could result in daily fines. So I know the select board has discussed this, and I know that the board has decided, there's been some discussion on whether or not these articles should stay at this time, Articles 22 and 23, because of the issues with and the concerns about the town meeting and safely accommodating everyone that would like to be there, but that, you know, we've had some recommendations from the state that we try to minimize controversial articles. So I know in regards to Articles 22 and 23, the select board will be discussing these two again, I'm sure at their meeting of June 1st, to decide whether or not to defer these items to the fall town meeting, perhaps when there are less concerns about the large gatherings of folks at town meetings. And I think the board was interested in feedback from the Finance Committee as far as your thoughts about the timing of these articles and whether you'd be more supportive of looking at these now or in the fall.
I think I'm certainly sensitive to not wanting to have an overly long or complicated town meeting, but I also have no assurance that come November, we won't be in a similar position. You know, I don't think a vaccine is particularly imminent here, and we could be looking at another flu season on top of COVID come November. So let's just say I'm not optimistic that we won't be having another kind of differently arranged town meeting in November. And, you know, these are important articles. These are things that we have been discussing for a while. I would certainly go with whatever consensus is, but I don't necessarily see a huge reason to keep pushing these off for a later date. Joyce, you had a comment?
Well, I think I'm nervous about the showing, and I do think it should be, they should be deferred. That's just my opinion. I think that also, as far as, what is it? Number 23, the sewer hookup. I don't know if there's some way of getting it out to, a lot of people still are not aware of it. I don't know how if there's something that a mailing or anything that can go out to existing homeowners that have it running down their street. I know that there was a lot of that was said about if it's a hardship, if it's a system that's only 5 years old, then you have another 5 years before you'd have to hook up. But I know a lot of my neighbors who we are going to have sewer coming down the street, and a lot of them are hooking up, weren't aware of this article. So I'm questioning as to how many people truly are aware of it, and is there any way that the DPW can notify people? Otherwise, I think we should defer it until we can notify people.
Yes, Craig?
Yeah, I agree with Joyce on deferring it. I think that, number one, getting as many of these articles covered in something similar to a consent warrant or consent article, where you have just like the unpaid bills, the ones that are typical housekeeping bills. I've seen that done where you can have one vote to knock off 5 or 6 articles if nobody objects and makes it unanimous. That might be a way to speed things up. And I wouldn't put anything remotely controversial beyond the budget on this warrant article with the hopes of getting in, getting out quick, and having a decent turnout for the important articles. When we have the controversial important articles, we have a chance to discuss them. And if that's November, or even if it has to slide until the following year, I would rather give a fair hearing to all of these articles rather than rush them at a time when it might be perceived that a low turnout slides something through against the will of the majority.
Yeah, I think that's an important consideration as well. Other questions from, who is that?
Kathy McInnes?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to speak in favor of having this article on the next town meeting. This has been, some of the properties are 20 years old that have had the sewer by them. Bow Street, for example, maybe 15, 18 years. And they are taking up or reserving for themselves valuable gallonage that developments that are in the process of being designed and public hearings would not be able to take advantage of this capacity. And as a water and sewer user, I am paying for the fact that these homeowners who have the sewer and water going, or the water going through by them, are not using it, but yet it's reserved at the Charles River, so it is being charged. And the people who have it going by them for all these years, they paid a betterment, and I believe it was interest-free, so they know what's going on. And perhaps a letter from either the DPW or the selectmen simply stating that, you know, back in the day, you got the sewer by you and you opted not to do it. Well, you know, you have 6 months or however long the bylaw says to hook into it or to relinquish your right to it. And that would afford other people the opportunity, developers, to use it. And also those that are paying for it, it would relieve us. So I don't think kicking this down, as my colleague said, for another year. Even November's going to be a worse town meeting. You know, we can't, I'm not in favor of shortening town meetings just to shorten them. This is an important issue that's the selectmen have been discussing for well over 2 years, and they finally got town council to put something in writing, a legitimate bylaw that could have a public hearing in one evening and notify everybody. So I would encourage my colleagues to support putting this bylaw on the June town meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kathy. Other questions from the committee? Are there other questions or anyone else has a comment? Any of our guests? Okay, Lisa, you have to unmute yourself.
Have to speak.
There we go.
Oh, stopped. Well, anyway, if you can hear me,
We can hear you.
okay. I'm going to speak in favor of putting both of these off until November. It's unless there's some way that we can personally notify all the homeowners who are going to be affected by something that could be, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 bill suddenly, that they have to sign up, and that would if we do notify them, then that's going to increase the number of people who come in June, which is going to be very difficult for self-distancing. And I think if we put it off to November, we'd be able to have some kind of a notice to them, some kind of a public hearing on both of these, actually, so that people, like Craig said, won't see us as trying to slide something by when nobody's paying any attention.
Well,
That's
and
all
Madam Chairman,
Go ahead, Craig.
my other concern is I'm totally in favor of this article. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it's overdue and should be done. My fear is if we do it at this town meeting, when the only people that have a vested interest in coming out are the ones that don't want this to pass, I think it undermines its chances of passing. So I would, number one, do it when you have a fair and representative turnout and not just a group that cares one way or the other with extreme views on it. And I think that will happen at a later date. And I think that there is a concern. I want to get the budget passed. That's the most important thing on this town meeting. If we can get through that quickly, I think that's the goal. But that's my thought. I want to do it fairly and I want to do it effectively. And I do firmly support this. I think it is absolutely the right thing to do. So that's all I have to say on that bit.
And I agree. I wholeheartly agree. I think it's the best way because there's housing people there are builders who want to build and their hands are being tied. I just think it's the wrong time. And I think that there needs to be some, I know that it's being worked on for the last 2 years, but a lot of things have been worked on that people aren't aware of. And I think that this is one thing because of the economic impact. I just think maybe it's a courtesy, but I think that the townspeople who are in a position of being fined or forced to, hook up should be notified in a proper way.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Just to put this to sleep, the town warrant is sent out to everyone, so it's in there. But again, I don't want the Finance Committee to become a board that kicks things down the road when this is a much needed relief for water and sewer users that are struggling to pay their bills, and to see now that the water towers are going to be, the enterprise fund's going to be paying for this close to multi-million-dollar project, and they're kicking in on that, and sewer projects for maintenance are going to be borne by the sewer users, and for the Finance Committee to once again kick this down the road like I've seen done so many times, like Joyce has rightfully said, at some point we have to address this. And I know everyone's concerned about getting a budget passed, But a town meeting is not just for a budget. A town meeting is for all the business that comes before the town. And not only are the ones that are going to be affected financially, like Joyce said, but we're being affected financially. The 70% or so of the water users that are paying for these people to just have the sewer go by them for all these years and not contributing anything. So, and then the selectmen are talking about lowering the requirements that the Charles River has for water to be per house that's allowed to go into the Charles River. So there'd be like gerrymandering requirements of the Charles River to satisfy the needs of developers in town, whereas this bylaw would take care of it. So, you know, we might have to stay another few minutes to take care of this and listen to what people, it's either up or down. If it doesn't pass on this one, like several zoning bylaws, we try again and we try again until it finally clicks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kathy. Mr. McKay, did you want to say something? I guess not. Aaron, did you wanted to say something?
Yes, I did real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
As the current town moderator, I'm obviously focused and concerned about town meeting this year and this spring, and making sure that we're able to conduct the business we need to conduct and that it's as safe and effective for everybody as possible. I've been looking at the warrant lately and am looking to see, as Craig had mentioned, if we could combine some things into a consent agenda. There's actually a lot. There's more, I would even venture to say there's more than 5 or 6 articles here that could potentially feasibly be grouped together. There was another town moderator that was mentioning that they use such a consent agenda, and if one of the articles within it is questioned, meaning maybe somebody doesn't want it to be part of the consent agenda, maybe they want more debate on the article. If there were 5 voters or more that agreed to it, then it would be pulled out of the consent agenda and acted upon as a separate article. So in terms of the integrity of town meeting, I certainly don't want to rush anything for the purpose of rushing. You know, the point of the meeting is that people are supposed to be able to debate and exercise their right to vote on things, and I certainly don't want to take that away, but we're also in an unprecedented time and we need to do this as safely as possible. So I'm still looking at this, and I'm writing up some recommendations that I'd like to end up having further discussions with the select board and legal counsel and Mr. Gazinski. So just to put that out there, I am aware and I am looking at it, and I definitely think that we could maybe take some extra steps this time to be a little bit more efficient, so we could, focus on some safety.
I'm all for efficiency, as long as every article that needs deliberation can be deliberated. But we have a lot of house cleaning articles too, housekeeping, not cleaning. But, in terms of the audit and certain things that are requirements of the town to do. So I would certainly support that. Doug, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, not at the moment. I'll let this fester for a while longer, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to address the topic again before we go up and down with votes.
Yeah. And, this is kind of our first time discussing this. I know that the select board wanted to kind of feel how we were feeling about this. And, so I guess they heard both sides of it. And this is why they get paid the big bucks, to decide what stays on the warrant and what doesn't. There's 2 sides to it. There's it's not cut and dry. So unfortunately, we can't give you a whole lot of consensus on that yet. So we'll leave it to you as you deliberate as to what stays on the warrant and what doesn't for this upcoming town meeting. Joyce, you had a question?
Yeah, aside from all that we've just discussed as far as the warrants, has anybody looked at or is this the time to discuss the communication system for the DPW?
I believe that will be in the, according to the select board and whether they want that to be as part of the capital article.
Mike, is it part of the capital article at this point?
It is not currently in the capital article. I think the board, will have some discussion on it at their meeting on the 1st and make a determination whether that'll be added at that time. So it's not formally on the warrant at this point.
And is there any way of revisiting the cost by going back to the company, seeing that Jim McKay was given a cost of, I believe it was $50,000 or $55,000. I don't have the information right in front of me. He could probably tell us for sure. But is there any way of revisiting that? So that maybe go back to the company and see if they can bring costs down a bit, seeing that the police department, the fire department, and the school department all have this system?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Pete?
There's a couple selectmen on. They can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but last Monday, the direction discussion was that the town administrator and the DPW and others would see if they could accomplish it with their FY20 funds, available funds. So it's likely, if they're successful, it won't be within the capital items.
Yeah,
So,
I
Madam
think
Chair?
there's a few different sources that are being looked at right now for the potential to satisfy that request. Yeah, Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we are looking at different options in light of the tight budgets and understanding that it is a priority item. So we are looking at that, and certainly we will be bringing our research back before the select board at the meeting on June 1st, and you will receive the finance committee will receive that immediately thereafter. Once we have that discussion and the board makes a determination. So again, for your meeting on June 3rd, we should have some additional information in regards to this particular item. But the point brought up by Ms. Boyardi is well taken, and we're looking at different avenues and aspects to this.
Thank you.
So I would like to impress on all the folks who have joined us tonight that we have the select board meeting next on June 1st, and then we will have our June 3rd and June 10th meetings. And those are the two meetings that we will be giving our final recommendations. And then we'll have 5 days in which the report needs to go to the printer. So we don't have a lot of time here. I know time moves slowly these days, but it's going to come on us pretty quickly. So we're going to need clarity as much as town departments can provide to us, as we are trying to do our very best to put forward a package to the voters that answers all their questions and gives them the information that they need so they can make informed decisions when it comes to town meeting time. And we also need the information so we can make informed recommendations as a finance committee. So I just would feel remiss if I didn't, let's say, beg all of the other departments that we're still waiting on information from to, really just get us that information that we need so we can deliberate and we can make our recommendations as quickly as possible without a lot of questions still hanging out there on different articles. Craig?
Yeah, maybe we could invite the school committee to, next week, because they are deliberating tonight and they can give us their proposed, the way they're planning to reach the target numbers at that point.
Yeah, I think that would be
So
perfect.
maybe send an invitation for them for next week. And then that would be really the last department we're working on, whether or not this radio is funded this year or whether it makes it to the warrant is totally a selectman decision that doesn't impact us at all. We'll deliberate on what we have. We have a budget in front of us we can deliberate on. Whether it changes slightly for something here or there, we can wait and see on, as long as we've got the principle that it's a 5% reduction in those key lines, and this is how the selectmen are recommending doing it, we can discuss that. And I think that does get us some pretty far down the road. But I do agree, having stuff at the longer stuff drags out, the worse it is. And the selectmen are not meeting next week. Is that correct, Mike? There's no
That's correct.
meeting next week.
The selectmen's next meeting is June 1st. At that meeting, I would expect that the goal would be for them to finalize the budget and sign and approve the warrant for the town meeting. You know, and any minor tweaks that may occur would happen on that evening. I believe, you know, I don't believe there'll be any new issues for the Finance Committee at your meeting on June 3rd. It'll just be a matter of whether or not all these articles are still there and whether or not there'll be any minor adjustments to the final budget. But you have 99% of the materials, I would say.
Yeah. I think once we get the school number and then we can have that discussion.
Yeah, that will be helpful. All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Kaczynski.
Just go briefly. I just wanted to touch upon this, and several of the Finance Committee members probably are already aware of this, and it was discussed briefly at the beginning of the meeting. But we were made aware late last week about the town's eligibility for $729,147 in CARES Act funds. As part of that legislation, the town can apply for COVID-19 related costs for FY20 and FY21. The select board did discuss that at their meeting Monday and asked Selectman Germain to put together a task force to go ahead and work with the town's department heads and putting together a request. The applications are due June 5th. It is the goal of the town to have that application in at the latest, you know, the 1st or 2nd of June. I know there are several members of the Finance Committee that Selectman Germain has reached out to, as well as a member of the school committee and some of the larger department heads and the school administration to work on this to make sure that we put together a cohesive package that requests the total amount based on the best estimates that we have for the impacts going forward through FY21. So I just wanted to make sure that the Finance Committee was aware that we're working on this. We will put forward the application in a timely fashion, and we will see what happens from there. But you know, see if other federal programs come through. But this one we know exists, and we're going to try to maximize it for the benefit of the citizens of Millis. And I just want to give that brief update on that, on the CARES Act and its impact upon the town.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Berube?
I just wanted to, I am participating, as Mike just described, in generic terms, but I just wanted to, out of abundance of clarity, reiterate or make the point that the funds in this portion, the $700,000+ must be directly related to a COVID impact or an anticipated impact in 20 and 21. It is not just a general fund to make up for lost revenue. So this is not, you know, $721,000 to make up a budget shortfall. It's for things that must either have happened or anticipated to happen directly related to COVID response, whether that be for PPE or IT that the school needs to operate, or a variety of things. And the strategy that I think the team is putting together is to throw as much at the wall and see what will stick as the state will be a clearinghouse, or the county will be a clearinghouse for all of the money that has come to Massachusetts.
Thank you, Pete. All right. Any other discussion of the FY21 budget or warrant before we move on to reviewing the minutes of our last meeting? All right, hearing none. Thank you, everyone, for your help and keeping us up to date on these important items. And we will move on to reviewing the minutes of our last meeting. Which I have
we
to say,
approve the minutes as
Deirdre,
written. Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as written. For discussion, I'm going to say, Deirdre, excellent job. As always, you gave us very detailed minutes, which will be really helpful for us to refer back to as we look at writing out our warrant articles. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, motion passes. Do we have any other new business that we need to discuss before we sign off? All right, I'll entertain another motion.
Madam Chair, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. And we will meet back on Zoom next Wednesday, same time, 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.